We hope you enjoy this episode of the Modern Arizona podcast. But first, an important message for our listeners.
Hello, this is Billie Tarascio, owner of Modern Law. We're a family law firm in Phoenix, Arizona, with offices throughout the state. We have attorneys who can help you with every aspect of your family law case. We also have a legal clinic run by students for those of you who need budget-friendly resources, and we have lawyers who've been practicing for more than 20 years. Collectively, Modern Law has more than 200 years of legal experience. So when you hire Modern Law, you're not just getting an attorney, you're getting a team. If you live in Arizona and need representation, call us today. That's 480-649-2905 or visit us at mymodernlaw.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Arizona podcast. I'm your host, attorney Billie Tarascio, joined today by Arizona legislator Junelle Cavero Harnell. Welcome to the show.
Great to meet you, Billie.
Great to meet you as well. I'm so happy that you are here. You actually were neighbors with my mom. Thank you for agreeing to come on the show and talk about what's going on in the Arizona legislature.
Happy to talk about it. As you know, I'm new. I was appointed in April. Representative Marcelino Quinones had stepped down, and I had the opportunity I was appointed by the county supervisors, 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat, and had this opportunity to sit in that position in transition, and then ran for office in our primary and succeeded in that primary in July. But in that time, when I was appointed, which was a great opportunity, within 24 hours, they asked if I could come to the legislature to vote on the 1864 territorial abortion ban. And so I landed at 9:30, got appointed at 9:58, and voted at 10:05. And so it was a historical vote. I was the last final vote for that abortion ban. And from that point forward, 8 weeks later, I was voting on many other bills and had a great opportunity, reading what my colleagues had put together and the policies that they had put together. And so looking forward to the next session.
Yeah. So how close was that vote?
By 1 vote. So I was the final vote.
That's just so crazy to me. It's
Yeah.
so crazy to me because it doesn't really reflect what Arizona voters want. So it's just mind-blowing to me that it feels like the legislators don't necessarily work for their constituents. Is that overbroad? That's just how it feels.
No, I mean, yes, there are legislatures that are built on policy, and there are times when you have moments built on your personal, values. And so when you have that, sometimes you have electors who feel so strongly towards their values that it supersedes their community. And that's been a situation in the state several times. So yeah, it's the current state that we're in right now sometimes. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And, that's kind of why we have ballot measures. It allows the public who feel very strongly about something to get law passed when the government won't do it. There's a lot of ballot measures that would make it harder for voters to get ballot measures on the ballot.
So that was a situation that happened this time around, even though I was the final vote and it didn't get through. There is now a proposition to put it back, and hopefully, the voters actually get an opportunity to voice their opinion, and I think we'll see it succeed. That this will be part of the Arizona state constitution, and we won't have to resume that situation again in the next session. And so it's a tug and a pull, but it's also an opportunity, but it's a costly opportunity. If we didn't have to go through this type of legislation, you're not wasting time and you're not wasting taxpayers' dollars on fighting legislation that they already, the majority already support or not support. And so that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if the other ballot measures are as clear.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, Arizona is so so divided and pretty balanced in its divide. As an independent candidate, I'm always looking for those solutions that are more bipartisan and that aren't aligned with either of the more extreme views that can come with either political party. Do you have people in the legislature doing that, reaching out across the aisle, like trying to find that common ground?
Absolutely. I mean, remember, I was there for only 8 weeks. And even though that was my first vote, I immediately went over to my colleagues on the other side, other women, to introduce myself. And as you get to know your colleagues and who you can work with on certain parts of legislation, it's great. But sometimes, even if it's a bipartisan effort, if the majority of that body doesn't agree, then all that effort is wasted, right? And so it's truly a hard situation to be in, but the I this time around, I mean, you were just saying you're an independent, so it must
Mhm.
be taxing when you got your voter guide. It's over, what, 350 pages long? It's insane, of, language, going into each proposition, explaining it. And, when you have both sides of the aisle fighting certain type of rhetoric, it could be super confusing for a voter. And and then you're not sure because titles may be misleading than what the actual bill is stating.
Right.
And
And the
so that's a lot.
signs,
Oh, absolutely.
the signs don't necessarily say what people like think they say. And so I'm really doing my best to try to get information out um, that is factually accurate and not driven by any ideology, but it is difficult. There are so many current ballot measures. This is an abnormally large number of ballot measures. Why is that?
I think because you see it's such a the assumption is for the first time in, I think it's over 40 some years, the legislature may actually lean to Democratic hold. And if certain bills weren't passed in committee, and this is an opportunity for the other side to put them as a referendum, to have the community vote for it. And so, thus, you have a whole slew of information. A slew of bills that got proposed that didn't pass at the state legislator level. So this is their last opportunity to try to
Hmm.
get that in there.
Hmm.
And it's a presidential cycle, so a lot of money spent this year. So you
Hmm.
wouldn't have that opportunity in 2 years because it's none. But this year, it's during a high presidential year, lots of money is spent, a lot of money's coming to the state. So manipulation of communicating what that bill or what that proposition is, um, can be spent, unlike in 2 years. So
Hmm.
it's just
Well,
about money and opportunity at the end of the day. So,
yeah. There is so much money in politics, and there's
yes,
so much
there is,
money in right now in the industry of politics and elections and all
right.
of the media that's being bought up. And so you're a state legislator. How
Mhm.
much does that position pay?
It's pretty low. By the end of the day, you're talking about after taxes about 11,000 a year, kind of a thing. Most of the legislators have another full-time job, such as myself. It's a part-time position in the state of Arizona, unlike California and some others. Arizona's part-time. It's about 4 to 5 months out of the year, each year. It's a tough situation to be in when you're if you're not in a very affluent or situation, for someone who's fighting an everyday situation, it's hard to get that job. Not everybody can have a remote position. Not everyone can
Right.
have that company who's going to support them during those 4 months in order to,
Hmm.
do what they're going to do. But and so you have legislators who are part-time teachers. You have legislators
Hmm.
who are, consultants, realtors, all across the board. Some who are even physicians who have to take time away from their practice to go to serve in that time. And it's funny when I say it's part-time. It's part-time in the legislature, but the remaining months out of the year, there's the job that people don't talk about, which is actually you're talking to your community, you're representing your community. It's an obligation more than a responsibility, right? And so there's a lot of things, and it's a hard job. That's why not many people want to go into public service. To me, a dying entity.
Mm.
Today you ask high school and college kids, "Anybody wanna work for government?" They're like, "Uh-uh," and and it's sad, and so I think it's also because of their exposure to the previous leadership in the last 6 years. I think the discussions that we have at home, I feel like we talk more about politics at home than we did when I was growing up. So,
Mm.
I think that, children are just more, averted to being a part of it. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, what is your personal and professional background that allowed you to be appointed by a majority of Republicans when
Yeah.
you're a registered Democrat?
I don't know, frankly, but I do know that, I had been in federal government affairs for 20 years. I had the opportunity to advocate for World War II veterans equity, Social Security, and multiple other areas, expanding Healthy Vet, which is um, the medical record program at the Veteran Affairs. U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and so I've been in government affairs for a very long time. And when I moved to Arizona, I started a family. And so I actually started working remotely. I run the largest multicultural digital media company in the country from home. And so I have a wonderful opportunity to stay with my kids. I'm a mom, single mom, with an 11 and 10-year-old. And, it's running, marketing and ads and giving guidance to political campaigns on my side
Mhm.
nationwide, and so I see a lot of array nationwide in the discussion. Very different than Arizona. Arizona's getting a taste of it this cycle because 'cause we're in play. So, but yeah, it's been a great opportunity, and as a political consultant over the years, to multiple campaigns and multiple candidates, it has been a tremendous ride, to say the least. So, yeah.
Being a candidate, is it very different being a candidate than it is
Oh.
being the consultant?
Absolutely. Being someone in the background has been always my forte. I love it. I love helping someone, elevating their platform, guiding them on how to be a better person and represent their community. But now being forward facing, even just this podcast,
Mhm.
it's nerving for me. It's something that I'm not accustomed to, but it's funny because now I'm putting all the practice that I'm saying to folks in play. And so it's also showing those and colleagues how to be better. I think holding a lot of folks accountable nowadays it's one thing saying something, it's another thing doing it. And so I'm hitting doors every week. I'm hitting, and talking to voters, talking to businesses, not just in my district, out of the district, getting to know the state, really learning about what you can do to elevate everyone. So, yeah.
What do you think are the top 4 ballot measures that you want Arizonans to focus on or know about?
Well, obviously, there's our proposition on abortion. I'm
Mhm.
hoping that folks vote in support of it. And then there's the Proposition 314, which
Mhm.
is, for those who don't know, it's a in my eyes, it's a racial profiling bill. It's supposed to talk about immigration reform, but it pivots in giving local law enforcement the responsibility to handle federal responsibilities. And I say that because it's tough on our local police when we don't have enough resources, and then you're asking them to do another task, a task that the federal government should actually be doing.
Well,
And
can we talk about this?
sure,
So, can we
absolutely.
let's talk about this one. So, it hasn't gotten
Mhm.
a lot of attention.
Okay.
Um, it really hasn't. So, Prop 3134
314.
314, does
Right.
this give officers the right or the responsibility of enforcing federal immigration laws?
So,
Okay.
Proposition 314, which used to be HCR 2060 in the legislature, okay, which passed in the legislature because it was a Republican leaning bill, Republican leaning legislature. It makes local law enforcement, like I said, enforce the federal immigration law, which we were in this situation in SB 1070 during Sheriff Joe Arpaio's time, that had law enforcement be able to local law enforcement decide who they want to pull over, show me your papers, kind of a
Well, so
situation.
can I ask about this? So,
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, SB 1070 allowed officers to pull people over who they suspected might be illegal, right?
Yes. Correct.
And I don't understand exactly what 314 says. Does it say that while you're arresting someone, you can then investigate their immigration status as part of your other arrest?
Correct. Not
Okay.
part of your other. It's in general, like you can question their status of citizenship.
Are you allowed to? Because I'm like Arizona faced all sorts of
Technically, you're not
lawsuits.
allowed to,
Yeah,
but
you're not,
but this
and you're not allowed to pull someone over just to ask them about their citizenship. You're not
correct.
allowed to do
That's the
that.
current situation today, right? But if this law passes, it allows a law enforcement to question, pull someone over, whether they're with their family, whether they're with
Only for that reason, just to ask about immigration
100%.
status?
Yeah, it's happened to me during SB 1070, I got pulled over at Casa Grande. So it's just, it creates, and it's like, well, who decides whether they pull off car A or pull over car B? And then
Well, yeah, you have to
right?
have reasonable cause, reasonable
Legally,
suspicion,
yes.
reasonable suspicion of a crime in order to pull somebody over and probable cause to arrest them.
Right.
And if I just don't actually understand. And the other thing I don't understand is right now, if officers find out that someone is here illegally, they're an illegal immigrant, what can they do? Don't they turn them over to ICE?
Right. I mean, that's the assumption, right? That they hold them until they hand them over to ICE. But and let's be clear, local law enforcement does not want this to pass because it's a
Mm.
hardship on each of those stations and each of those officers because you're not
Because now what do
fulfilling.
they have to do? They find out somebody's here illegally. They can't just write them a ticket. They have to then
No,
arrest them and hold them.
right, correct. And then they take them and put them in another place, time,
And
whatever
then wait,
gets
do
decided.
they wait for ICE at that point? Or are they, how can a
That's
state be
unclear.
charged with executing something that is federal jurisdiction? Like as a lawyer, I'm not getting it.
Right, and that's the fuzzy part, which is really hard because people don't understand when you're taking an hour to 5 hours to handle that one case, that 1 to 5 hours can be held to someone who is actually committing a felony or a crime, right? And so you're taking that individual because we have a shortage here in Arizona for local law enforcement. We have a hard recruitment situation as well. And so you're adding an additional responsibility to that individual. On top of that, the costs for the legal costs happening from that point forward to whatever happens, is accrued by the county. And today, for example, Maricopa County is still dealing with over 300 million in lawsuits from that time period during Sheriff Joe Arpaio from SB. So 300 million, which is what I live in Maricopa County. I represent, South Phoenix, Levine, and Guadalupe. I have to deal with that continuously. And on top of that, majority of my district is who's impacted by a similar law such as SB 1070 because we have a high multicultural community. Over 81% of the community is of some,
So would the would the officers turn over the case to prosecutors and prosecutors would then file in local courts and allege violations of federal law and then ask the local courts to adjudicate what has typically been handled by immigration court? Is that what would happen?
yes.
There's just going to be so many lawsuits.
Yes. And see, you would understand that because you were a practicing attorney. But I don't think everyone understands that again, stating something is very different than execution and actually handling the process, which is very, very costly. The idea and concept of what you're trying to propose is not the solution. to immigration reform. It's
Well, let's
literally
talk about that then, because Arizonans are very, very concerned about illegal immigration.
right.
So, what can we do as a state? Because voters care about this.
As a state, and mind you, if we're not talking about a proposition, we're talking about working within the legislature, creating, pathways of citizenship, supporting folks who, are going through the process right now. You have to remember, to get citizenship, it can last from like 3 years to 8+ years.
Well,
And
and
it's a
wait a
matter.
second. Wait, so you broke up for a minute, but Arizona can't create pathways to citizenship.
Correct. But working with the federal government, you can't. And so it's really a pressure point for whoever decides to become, or not decides, whoever becomes our president in this upcoming election cycle, what they're going to do. As someone, it's one thing dealing with our statewide issues of immigration reform when it really is truly a federal issue. And
Right,
Arizona hits it every single day. And
right.
not providing the proper funding for the program that they're trying to do really
Mhm,
impacts us directly as someone who lives and resides every day in
mhm.
Arizona. And so, really, it's the legislators, it's the governor working with the federal government to enforce the program that they're supposed to be enforcing. And, when they're not communicating and they're not talking about budget and they're not fighting for it enough, in my eyes, I think this is the situation you're dealing with on a constant basis.
This is Billie Tarascio, owner of Win Without Law School and Modern Law. Win Without Law School is a program that operates nationally and helps people who are representing themselves or who just need more help. If you are in a family court case and you're feeling confused, you need direction, you need help figuring out questions to procedural or strategic issues, Win Without Law School can help. At Win Without Law School, you've got two experienced attorneys, me and my partner Julie Lebenz, who can guide you through the court process and help you troubleshoot your case. You've got access to courses, planners, checklists, and live Q&A. Our live Q&A is where you can get help from us and your community. We also have a closed Facebook group just for members where you all can share your experience, share your pleadings, get advice, and mentorship. Join us today at winwithoutlawschool.com. That's winwithoutlawschool.com. It feels like perhaps the solution for Arizona is just to have more officers investigating crimes,
Yes, in
separate
some ways, but we can't,
from
but
immigration.
you can't, and that's the problem, is that we have a we have a recruitment
Right.
shortage, even with incentives for those to join the
Hmm.
the the police force. It's still a challenging time because, social political aspects of what the position entails. And it's unfortunate because in my district, unlike many others, we fight for the police force. We need more police. It is
Yeah.
important, for where we live. There's a current situation every week that happens. I do think that certain practices may change, should change. I don't want to militarize our police. I'm saying I
Right.
want more police on our streets. And
Right.
that's the critical conversation we're having here, that everybody splits hairs that, well, they're a Democrat, they believe this, or they're a progressive, or they're a Republican, and this. At the end of the day, I am 100% confident everybody wants to have public
Right.
safety. And
Right.
and defining that is having police at the right place, right time, and also having them, be a part of the community. And in my district, coffee with a cop is huge, which is we meet our police officers once a week. Community members get to go and ask. It's very friendly. I can't say that happens in the rest of the state, but I do think you need to highlight our strengths, and you need to invest in programs that focus in training and focus in expanding and recruitment for our law enforcement. And so that's part of dealing with public safety, which is what everybody is most concerned about, which they think is a result of immigration, when that
Sure.
is one of the arms that impacts our public safety. It's not
Right.
the whole sole reason why we have the current situation we have today. And
Mhm.
Most of the legislators on both sides agree with that. It's just getting them to look past through the rhetoric, the jargon, the party politics to actually agree and pass legislation. So when you say, "Can the state do something?" Yes, they can. They can invest more, and we can elevate that as a whole, in my eyes.
Okay, so we've got public safety, and it seems like the best thing to do is to put more funding there. Then we've got failing schools that are dead last behind every other state and behind Washington D.C. And my kids go to a charter school, and they're getting a relatively good education. I want to say that because it's not even at the charter schools are everybody in my kids' charter school, crushing the standard testing. I think we should all be very concerned that the state of public education is as bad as it is.
Yeah, I mean, let's there's so much rhetoric also behind this. If people don't understand that the starter and creation of charter schools to was developed in urban areas to help communities that had challenging areas. We built STEM schools. I was part of
Mhm,
development of these in 15, 20 years ago in
mhm,
areas that had no access. And so the concept had good intention. Okay.
mhm,
And in the state of Arizona, because were some tax benefits and incentives, it got abused. And so when you have a system that's also abusing the opportunity of having, creating an ESA voucher scam, then you have this huge issue of, well, it's taking away from money directly that can go to the public school education system. And so what the problem is there is a complete tug. And there isn't someone who's actually just saying, this is the line. This is where we're gonna stop." Okay? And it hasn't been defined yet because everybody is avoiding it. You have folks who they wanna blame where it came from, but,
mhm.
in the beginning of it, yes, it was started in 1965 by a controlled legislature, but the fact is systematically, it's been underfunding the public education system, which is now ultimately closing, and in my district alone, we're about to close possibly 4 to 5 public schools, which have been historically there for, decades, and it's the first step is to eliminate the voucher scam portion that is bleeding the public education system. I'm not saying that you're closing down charter schools. I'm saying there is an abused portion of those who are participating in the program. And it's terrible. I mean, public education is a right for every child. Increasing the funding, I mean, we're dead last. We're number 50 in the country according to Arizona Central now. And it's a shame because we've had so much growth and opportunity on one end from our manufacturing, our environmental, from, these new manufacturing plants. There's so much potential in this state,
Right,
yet we're
right,
not investing in the basics of public education.
right.
And there's also a tap because there's not enough revenue coming into the state. That's a whole nother economic problem, which we can talk about later. But the the public schools are under attack. Our teachers, as everyone knows, are paying for their school supplies. They're leaving droves, I mean, by the droves because they're not getting paid
Yeah.
enough, which is insane. By,
Mhm.
your standard, salary for teachers, 35, maybe 40 pushing it, really, depending on what school, maybe even less. And in an economy that we're in right now, it's a major issue, and I talk about pocketbook legislation, Billy. It's, what impacts us on a daily basis. When you have teachers who have 2 to 3 extra jobs just to get by, it's insane. And some of these teachers, the biggest expense is childcare, which is insane
Right.
too. And so when your childcare costs is more than your revenue coming into the house, it's a big, big, big problem. And so, but going back to your initial question is, these charter schools, some of them are tremendous, but some of these, they're literally bleeding the system pocketing the finances, and unfortunately, some of the legislative members have direct revenue coming in from these charter schools, which to me is
Well,
a conflict of interest.
does
Mhm.
does the Arizona legislature agree that it is a problem that our public schools are performing so badly? Do they agree on that?
I would say one caucus agrees with that. I don't think the other side does.
Oh, okay. So no, there is no agreement on the fact that this is a problem. And
Correct.
so if you don't have an agreement on that,
Right.
you won't get to how do we solve our problem.
Right. But
And
again, if your income is based on the charter school program, you own a charter
Mhm,
school or you sit on a board and you're
mhm,
getting a stipend, you're not, it's
mhm.
a conflict of interest. You're not going to impact the money coming into your own pocket. You get what I'm saying? So we've got a really, I've noticed that was the one thing. There are two major things I noticed in the legislature in the 8 weeks I was there. The amount of business done, but those who represent companies or have direct revenue coming into their own personal pockets, it really eschews and impacts good policy. And
Well,
so,
is there conflict of interest laws and
oh,
rules?
not as much as you would think. It was really interesting on the federal level after working there. There were practices that I would never think because they were, conflict of interest. You wouldn't represent the company and then, pass the legislation naturally that would impact them to bring greater revenue or support them in any way. Unlike in the state of Arizona, you have companies that represent candidates. They'll advocate and they'll run their campaigns. And then at the same time, they're also lobbying them. They have a direct line to them, which is a conflict of interest in itself. You can't usually, for example, if you were a member of the legislature and you served, you have a clause that you cannot be doing any kind of form of government affairs for 2 years. Unlike those laws should apply to the same consultants in the same way. If you were someone who, worked on a campaign, say candidate A, you shouldn't have the ability to lobby candidate A for 2 years of the legislature. That doesn't happen. What happens is they go directly to candidate A and say, hey, this is what's most important to us. And because we worked on your campaign, can you vote for this? That is a major conflict of interest. And that happens all the time on both sides of the aisle.
Mhm,
And I've had conversations on both sides of the aisle that this is a major problem. We have a major campaign ethics issue, which then
mhm,
skews our policies. Everybody
mhm,
agrees.
mhm.
Everybody's agrees, but they don't know how to develop it and create it. And so we're all, it's something that I'm looking into, but it is a major problem. And it's something I would love to focus on. By the way, that's my dog growling, not me in the background. But
That would be really good. It would be really, really good if we could figure out how to avoid conflicts of interest because personally, I don't really care. I want the charter schools to do well. I'm not opposed to that. But that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that should not mean that the public schools don't do well. And I feel like we have this obligation to take care of public schools. 80% of kids in Arizona are in public schools. And I feel like we're failing them and we're not even talking about it.
it's amazing because I tell everyone, it's an abused program. And it when we're talking about ESAs, it again, if you see a funding stream, a loophole to line your pockets, that's what's been happening. And it's been going on for such a long period of time that even though the majority of Arizona believes in a better public education system, and if you have leadership that does not act upon it, we had
Mhm.
every opportunity at the budget,
Mhm.
on our last day at budget. Not one
Mhm.
thing, not one entity of that impacted our public education or addressed ESAs. That
That's
to
what
me
I'm
was a big
seeing is
loss.
like it's just not a focus. Like none of these ballot measures talk about it. Like none of the headlines talk about it. It's just not a focus.
And it's sad. It's not that it hasn't been a focus before, it has. You had teachers who did a huge strike, 2 cycles ago.
Right.
You had
Right.
It was a discussion. But now that we have a sitting governor who's a Democrat sitting on the different side of the aisle, it is a complex situation because you think that that office would lead in a better public education system. And I'm not saying they
Mm,
haven't done some investments.
mhm,
I'm just saying
mhm,
it's not enough. We're talking
mhm,
about you advocating for higher pay, better working conditions. I'm
mhm,
talking about not when you have in the budget, you know, there was a line item for including pepper balls in public safety to be used among, protesters. You're putting money towards something line item like that, towards not something in education. There's a big problem here,
big
and
problem.
big, big, big
So, instead of funding officers and funding schools, we're fighting about things that feel to me so political.
right, 100%. And and I think and it's been the climate, Billy, like the last 2 cycles, you can't make it up. The climate has impacted legislative bodies and good policy because people think, "Well, what about the votes? What about my endorsements, my supporters?" It's not about good policy at the end of the day. They forgot about it. Literally, when I read these bills, I was flipping through these bills, and there's standard protocol, and they're poorly written. They're paperclip left and right, and you have to vote on something even if you for me, I came at the tail end. I didn't agree with, one third here, two thirds there, and I can't have the opportunity to fight for it. Yet this entire body has been fighting for it for the last 8 some months. That
Mhm,
was concerning. And
mhm,
and so I'm hoping, we have an opportunity this year. 20 out of the 29 were brand new into the legislature. And come November 5th, we have a whole brand new group. And, if it's really about working with one another, and I've seen from both sides, it's trying to find those aligned issues that, despite our differences between districts and party politics, that it uplifts the community. And I think if we just focus on that, that's truly important. I think that if the governor and her next opportunity, which will be when she addresses us in January, talks about, public education, talks about, these what you talked about, these mid-level areas of policy, that's key. And I think we can get there. But yeah.
what is I don't wanna take too much more of your time, but
No, you can
what
go ahead.
what other issues do you think are most important to Arizona right now?
It sounds like jargon, but it is really the economy. And as someone who's a single mom, recently divorced, when you're trying to deal and a mother of 2, right? When you're trying to deal day-to-day expenses and just make it happen, and you're trying to make sure you're being a good parent, you really hope your local government is gonna be there for you, that they're gonna be helping fight and provide more, help to those working families. And for me, it's building that a better economy for the state of Arizona. And oh, are you there? I think I lost you.
Mhm,
Oh, there you go. Um, and so for me, it's 2 things. It's one about, and it sounds crazy, but I do think childcare at this time frame where we are as a country, we need to think about it. We need to revisit and actually talk about the benefits of supporting a better, childcare program. I mean, in Tempe, which mind you, if you live and reside in Tempe, they cover for your childcare expenses, which makes me wanna move to Tempe, but that's not the case. And, I think that if the state gives incentives for companies to provide childcare assistance, be able to give the opportunity for those to think about, how to help that working parent. There's other ways to create like maybe state tax incentives, also for insurance companies who are interested in providing childcare assistance to childcare facilities in the state of Arizona. That's huge because they're also leaving by droves. They don't want to deal with those issues. But creating an employer tax incentive for those providing childcare, I think will be really key. And
mm,
then second, more importantly, I think that, any ways of building better training, because we have better training programs and investing in training programs for those who are going into electrical engineering, those who are going into areas that are in high demand due to these new manufacturing companies. I think will give you're talking about currently, 60,000 jobs in the state of
Right.
Arizona that
Right.
are well-paid jobs. A kid
Right.
can graduate from high school,
Mm-hmm.
enroll in a community college program that is a training program that goes to Lucid or goes to
Mm-hmm.
TSMC, and
Mm-hmm.
come out with an $80,000 job. That's
Yeah.
that's
That's a win.
tremendous. That's a
Yeah.
huge win. And so for the
Yeah.
state to invest more in that kind of a training program for our kids
Mm-hmm.
and for our community, you're building a better economy. And so I'm just saying that between training and childcare, to me, our economy will be in a better state. And I think we'll be on a better trajectory, really. Anyway.
Janelle, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate your time. Please tell people where they can learn more about you.
Love to. Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. All these issues do hit Arizona, but they're also issues that hit nationwide. And, sorry, my dog's like, yes, you're done. Have a great day and have a good week. Bye. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Arizona podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, make sure to download it, like it, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you know someone who would be a good guest or you would like to be on the Modern Arizona podcast, make sure to give us an email or reach out to us at mymodernlaw.com.